Hello, my bunny besties. If you're new here, my name is Bunby. Welcome. And if you are returning, hi, how are you? It is so nice to see you again. It is that time for another speed build on Oak Hollow, our nostalgic suburban Halloween core island that we have been working on for this autumn season. It's a little bit bittersweet to say, but this video will be our second to last build on this island, with our next speed build being the final one before our island tour. And I know that we're in the midst of November, so I'm sure that a lot of you are already done with autumn, wiping your hands of it and moving on to Christmas and the winter season, but I still have a little fall fever left in me. So let's dive into today's speed build, where we will work on our much anticipated pumpkin patch, along with an apple orchard that features a rooftop cafe, some autumnal farmland, and my home, which I will be converting into a bed and breakfast farmstead at the center of it all. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you are not yet subscribed, as I would love to have you join our cozy community. But without further ado, let's dive in. So as always, let's pop on our safety gear and get to work. Now, since my home will be the main centerpiece of this build, we are going to be starting off by laying all of the pathing in front and around, as well as partially decorating. Things have been a little all over the place for this build, and I had such a difficult time trying to figure out where to even start recording for today's video. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that city core islands are kind of my comfort zone. Of the 3 islands I've done, 2 of them have been city core, which is still really odd to me because I started out as a natural cottagecore builder when Animal Crossing New Horizons was first released, and I actually had an aversion to city core islands. I did not like them. I did not understand the hype or the appeal. I was like, this goes against the entire ethos of the Animal Crossing franchise. Why would you want a city when the whole idea is to be getting away from the city? I was in my pick-me era for sure, because city core islands are beautiful and my heart has changed on the matter, and I love every single island type. I think that they are all incredible and so creative, but when I do work on city core builds, there's usually a very clear start and finish to whatever build I'm working on, so it can be really easy to rebuild them for videos. But when I'm working with a more natural kind of like cottagey style, it can be so difficult trying to figure out where to start and where to finish, especially because like all the pathing is so natural and it changes and evolves over time, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just putting things on the ground. But that is why I decided to give myself entirely free reign to just build whatever my heart desires on this back right corner of the island. I only have 2 areas left. I have this spot, and then you'll see there's like a little river area. On the other side of that will be the final build for Oak Hollow. I have some pretty big plans. I'm hoping that I can achieve them because it is a pretty small area, but you know, that is my specialty, it feels like. Now, if you've seen our previous autumn island, you'll know that my villager's home was an apple orchard and cafe, and I'm trying to take a little bit of a different approach with this build, but the bones are very similar, so I knew that I needed to try and go through and find a new way to reinterpret this idea and just try and help show a different approach, just to let you guys see how you can kind of have a similar idea to an old one, but just reimagine it in a new way across multiple different islands. As we all know, Animal Crossing New Horizons has been out for a very long time, and I am sure that we are all slowly but surely going crazy, running out of ideas for islands and builds. So there's nothing wrong with rebuilding the same stuff over and over again, because every island is going to be different no matter what you do. Even if you do the same theme over and over, the layouts are going to be different. Inspiration that strikes can lead to different ideas. So at the end of the day, there is nothing wrong with building the same stuff over and over again, and you might find ways to improve upon it if you try to do a build that you've done before. So that is my goal here, to build an apple orchard and a pumpkin patch, which I have done in the past, but do them in a new way, in a new style, just to show you that things can be switched up and given a little bit of a facelift. So if you couldn't tell by the cute little sign I put out front of my home, I am turning my house into a bed and breakfast, which I'm super excited for. I love this idea so much, and it seems like it's pretty fitting since the property that my home is on is kind of like a commercial small town farm. It seems like the sort of like destination place that people would want to stay at in like a picturesque town during fall. So it made sense for me to turn my home into kind of like a destination area to come visit, since so much of Oak Hollow is very like structured and city-esque. It makes sense to try and kind of lean into more of the touristy side of things, which once again is very similar to what we did on our previous autumn island, with the apple orchard kind of being this like revitalization project for the town of Pottsfield. But for here on Oak Hollow, this is more so just an area that you can kind of like escape from the city and go back and kind of like reconnect with nature a little bit, but in a way that is a bit more commercialized, since this is still a city. And I'm not going to be showing the interior of this build in this video because I am currently in a bit of a crunch trying to get this video out in time, since I dealt with so many technical difficulties with this build, which we will get into in a little bit. But just know that my home is decorated and you will be able to see it once the dream address is released. I'm still trying to decide if we're going to do some house walkthroughs in the island tour that I will be doing in a bit, but for now just know that it is going to be a little bit of a surprise for you to explore whenever you decide to come visit Oak Hollow. But enough yapping about dream addresses and island tours. We are nowhere near ready for that sort of thing yet. We are still working on the builds for this island. So to focus on that, I'm going through and putting down the bones of the apple orchard. We're laying all of the pathing just so I can try and figure out where everything is going to go. And I will say that I did take some inspiration off of some pictures that I found on Pinterest, because I wanted to try and figure out that more structured city core version of the apple orchard and pumpkin patch, like I was talking about with reimagining those builds in a different style. And so I found these pictures. I'll pop them up here on screen right now. These three were the main inspiration behind this entire build, just to help give myself a bit of direction. And so I will be linking all of the socials for these creators down below. They are absolutely incredible. I think these are so gorgeous. So these were super helpful in trying to figure out how the heck I was going to pull this build off. I'm also going through and laying down some tile bits in the back area of this island. Now I will say it was really difficult trying to figure out what the heck I was gonna do to cap off this build. There is something about building at the back of your island that is somehow harder than building the entrance of an island, because with the entrance it's like there's so much space and there's so much possibility and you don't want to like take it in the wrong direction. But when it comes to the back half of the island, it's like, how the heck am I going to finish this build off to where it's not just, you know, dipping off into the void of New Horizons? So I decided to try and build some structures, which is what those kind of like blocky areas are at the back. But we are going through now and finally placing the apple trees down for the apple orchard. Now I don't notice it until a little bit later, but I done did messed up and I placed the trees in the wrong spot. So you will see the exact moment when I figure that out. But we're going through now and decorating this decking space in front of the apple orchard. I really just wanted to try and layer up as many items as I could. Now I wanted this area obviously to be very structured. I wanted it to look a bit more commercial, but I also wanted to add some personality because this is still technically a spot that is the home of my villager. It is owned by her, and you know, there's always going to be some clutter at a farm. I feel like farms, things tend to like pile up, like machinery and tools and things like that. So I'm just going through and kind of cluttering all these little items that I feel like really kind of pull the space together and make it feel a bit more homey. Even though this area isn't necessarily like cottagey, I really want it to kind of feel like the place where maybe you've been here before. That's kind of the entire ethos of this island, is I want all of these spaces to feel like something that you possibly could have seen once in your childhood traveling, or even in your own hometown. And so I'm going through and really just trying to fill these spaces in. As you can see here, I'm going through and laying down some flowers. I have really been enjoying using these orange pansies on this island. I think that they're so pretty. But now we're going through and finally building out the structure area toward the back, and these weird blocks are finally going to make sense. The reason I had a space in between these two is because I wanted to put a pergola down, because I feel like that's a really pretty kind of like roof type design. And so I went ahead and did that, and then layered some storefronts in front of that just to try and give it the illusion of kind of like a barn space. Now a little bit of spoilers, but I will be building a barn a little bit later in this video, so this is kind of like a secondary barn, I guess. But we are going through and trying to bring a bit more personality and flavor to the actual apple orchard itself by placing down some design tiles, because of course you gotta have the design tiles. I will say it feels a little bit weird leaving so many tiles in this area open. I'm not used to using the in-game pathing, so it feels a little bit awkward. But as you can see here, I'm going through and placing down these plain party lights arches in between the trees, which I just think is so beautiful. It looks like it's being decorated for kind of like a festive holiday event. And I'm going through once again trying to clutter this area up before suddenly realizing, looking around and taking in the fact that the spacing of these trees is completely wrong. I can't believe that this was a miscite. This happened to me multiple times while working on this island, but I'm gonna go through and fix it with a pretty shoddy little transition. Here we go. I just tucked the apple trees in one more space. That way these plain lights party arches can actually sit in between the trees and look like they're strung up in between them instead of, you know, this awkward gap in between. But once again, going through, filling up these little spaces, having the plain lights party arches down meant that it was really difficult to figure out which tiles were actually open to be decorated on. But regardless, these tiny builds I feel like help bring a lot of character to an area because you can try and just shove as much stuff as you physically can into these spots, which, as you will know, that is my biggest design tip, is if you are struggling with an area, make it smaller. It will look so much cooler if everything is kind of just like forced to be puzzle pieced into these areas. But as you can see here, I'm going through and placing down these giant rusty tanks. Now, of course, there is an apple orchard here on this little plot of land, which means that I'm also probably going to be bottling up some cider, of course, some apple juice. So I like to think that these tanks are maybe like fermentation tanks for processing the apple cider. And so I went through and just kind of like built out kind of this little industrial spot. But now we're moving on to this area, which I think might be possibly my favorite part of this entire build, and that is this rooftop diner area. Now, this is a very small build. It's very narrow. You really can't move around too much, and you can only access one of the tables, but I feel like it's going to be a really nice spot to come and get some pictures. I think it's so pretty that you can kind of like see the apple orchard sitting underneath, and it's one of those areas that is not only a lookout but also interactable, which I think is so much fun. But we are now going to be moving on to the kind of bottom half of this build. So I'm going through and placing it down the dirt pathing that I've been using pretty much all over the island, which, by the way, if you are curious about the codes that I am using, I do have my Pinterest linked down below. I am constantly changing out codes and adding new codes, so I have a board dedicated specifically to Oak Hollow, which you can find on my Pinterest account, and you can find every code that I've used over there. If you don't see something, just know that it's probably just saved under a different creator's code, but everything is in there. And I'm going through and trying to build out kind of a little bit of a parking lot, which is so weird to say because this is such a natural area, but I tried to like create a dirt lot because I feel like if you go to an actual pumpkin patch, usually you're not parking in like a parking lot, you're parking in like a dirt lot because it's a farm and farms are not going to be paved. So I decided to use the light colored dirt and build out a little dirt parking lot. Whether this is used by those visiting the apple orchard or those going to the pumpkin patch, or even possibly guests of the bed and breakfast, regardless, I wanted to give a little spot to kind of park some cars, just remind you that this is a city core island, and also, I gotta be honest, just to take up space because I didn't know what the heck I was gonna do down here. I wasn't sure if I should like extend the pumpkin patch over to this side. I was also contemplating using some crops, but I gotta be totally honest with you guys, I do not really like how the crops look in game. I feel like they really only fit on an island if your island is set in the summertime or in spring, because they are just so saturated, and I don't know why they don't kind of change to match the colorway of whatever season you're in, because even if you're in the winter time, the autumn time, the trees, the shrubs, the flowers, even the weeds will all change to match whatever season you're in, and then you'll place down a potato plant and it's like bright green, and I don't understand why. So I pivoted away from the crop idea, which I'm honestly not too mad about because this parking lot is a lot cuter. I really loved using the wild log bench here as a little parking stop. It gave me a very nostalgic feel for like campsites that I would go to when I was a kid, and you would always kind of like park in these dirt lots that would just have like a piece of wood to differentiate where all the parking spots are. So I will definitely be tucking this little design hack in my pocket for later. That kind of came as a bit of a design whim because I was trying to figure out what to use. I didn't really want to use a super structured city core item to be the parking stopper, so I went with those logs. I thought they were pretty cool. I'm going to be using that again in the future for some more natural islands. But now we're going through and doing the filler around the parking lot area. Now, I have been in desperate need of some water terraforming on this island because, as you'll know from all of my previous videos, everything has been very flat, very structured. There is no water features. So it was really fun to be able to go through and add this little tiny micro pond in front of my house, but it also kind of helped fill in the area a bit more. As I mentioned, I was really struggling with figuring out how to fill these spaces in. So as you can see here, I'm laying down a blanket for a picnic because when in doubt, make a picnic. That is second on the list of design advice. I honestly should probably just like make a top top 10 list and we can kind of, you know, build it out together. Let me know in the comments down below, what is your design tip? We will build out a list for beginners. I say number 1, shrink an area. Number 2, make a picnic when in doubt, and I'll let you guys fill in the rest. But I'm going through and trying to just place down some items, fill it in a little bit. I really didn't want to add too much to this picnic area because I wanted you to still be able to kind of like walk through a little bit. And I was also starting to kind of reach the limit of lag on this part of the island. So when I went through and placed down the white car earlier, the mini car, there was no animation. It just popped onto the screen because my game is struggling. It was really trucking through this whole build. I added so much stuff. I think almost every single tile is covered in something in this area, and so my game was really chug-a-luggin', and I had wheat fields galore in this build, which you will see more of in just a little bit. But yeah, going through and adding all of these filler areas, I really would have liked to fill them in some more, and there are some areas that I once again would like to fill in some more, maybe when I'm not recording, because it is such a nightmare trying to record when you are dealing with some serious lag in Animal Crossing. I remember dealing with this with Bleakmore when I did the bog area. I don't think I included that in the actual speed builds because going through and creating the bog on that island and placing down at least like 800 wheat fields quite literally killed my Switch. So I was kind of dealing with the same issue here. You can see a little sneak peek for where we're going to be moving on to next in the background. But yeah, I don't know why I have the footage out of order, but you know what? We're here. It's already done. I'm going through the voiceover, so we're gonna stick with it. But as you can see, things get pretty wild in the background. So I do end up cutting this bit out, but I actually ended up getting stuck in this little filler area as I was building it because I was not being very strategic with my building, and down below I can't access the lower level because of the way that I've built this cliff. And so I ended up getting stuck, and I actually had to call the rescue services, which I never ever use. So let me know if that's a service that you guys ever end up using on your islands. But we are now officially moving on to the barn, and I don't know, maybe this is my favorite area. I am so indecisive. I love so many of these spots so much, but this is a barn slash cider brewing plant yet again. Maybe these are like two buildings that are like technically connected, or maybe one is like where the apples go to get processed and this is the one where they go to get bottled. Who knows? This could also just be an area where heavy machinery is stored. You'll see that I add a tractor later on, so you know the tractor's got to go somewhere. But I am just having so much fun working on this specific area of the build. I know I said that the apple cider diner was my favorite, but I think that this might be my favorite spot actually. I'm gonna retract my original statement and decide that this is my favorite area, and I think it's because it feels the most autumnal of all of them, which is so weird because we literally have a pumpkin patch, but this feels more autumnal than any other spot in this build, and I love it so much. There is something about just farm core and these beautiful like farmy autumnal vibes, wheat fields, all these things, all the pumpkins and the reds, and everything is just so beautiful. And maybe it's because I'm just not ready to relinquish my iron grip on autumn right now. So many people are transitioning into the holidays and Christmas and winter already, and I'm like, guys, please, Thanksgiving hasn't even happened yet. And I know that not everybody celebrates Thanksgiving. It is a very America-centric holiday, at least the timeline of Thanksgiving that we have. And I don't know, regardless of that, for me personally, Christmas decor does not come out until the day after Thanksgiving. Please let me know down below, are you someone who decorates the day after Halloween, or are you someone who decorates the day after Thanksgiving? Because if you decorate for Christmas the day after Halloween, I'm sorry, that's a little bit crazy. You're getting ahead of yourself a little bit too much, my friend. I'm not trying to judge anybody. You're more than welcome to decorate for Christmas in the middle of summertime if you would like to. But I do feel a sense of urgency, like I feel like I'm running out of time, especially working on this specific island because this is an autumnal island, but so many people, especially in the Animal Crossing community, are already moving into their winter islands, and I'm like, hey, please, let's slow it down a little bit because I'm still working on my autumn island, and there are so many creators that are like, I don't know, halfway through a winter island already. I'm just feeling like I'm running out of time. I also have a little bit of FOMO because I really want to work on a winter island. I'm partially anxious about a winter island, but also really excited. I'm anxious because Bleakmore, our winter island for last year, burnt me out completely, and I ended up having to take a hiatus from the channel, but I have something in mind that I feel like is going to be a lot more fun and vibrant instead of the dark Dickensian vibe that we had last winter. So I'm definitely really ready to dive into the snow and show you guys that it can be fun to decorate in winter on Animal Crossing. But yeah, I'm also just not ready to give up the autumn vibes. I mean, I live in Florida, it's still 80 degrees out. I'm sorry, I'm in no mood to pull out a sweater. I'm in no mood to drink hot cocoa, partially because I don't like hot drinks. I'm not ready for frosted cookies and stringing lights up on a tree. I don't even know where my Christmas decorations are. I've like hidden them so far away in my apartment, I don't know what recess they are currently hiding in. But yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, if you couldn't tell, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on when to decorate for the holidays. I know not everyone even celebrates the holidays. I know that there are plenty of holidays that kind of center around the winter seasons. So yeah, just let me know what your thoughts are on this, because it's very anxiety inducing. I didn't think that it would be, because it's supposed to be like an enjoyable time of the year, but the holidays are always the most stressful time of the year for me personally. But as always, I have rambled over the most important parts of this speed build. As you saw, I went through and just tried to get all the pathing figured out, and now I am laying down the fencing just to help kind of close in the field area. And we are going through with a little bit of editing magic to place down all of the wheat fields, because this took me like 20 minutes to place all of these down. But I think that when you go through and actually add all the wheat fields, it makes this area look a lot bigger. When you look at it empty, it didn't seem like it was that much room, but going through and adding the wheat fields, filling it in like this, really made the whole space come to life. Now I'm just going through and picking up some of the wheat field decorations so we can go through and place down some more interesting things to look at, some windmills, some scarecrows. I really love how this area turned out so much. I was able to use items that I don't normally get to use because I don't ever make actual farms, and it was just so much fun to go through and put that together. It's very simple, but I highly recommend it. If you've never made an actual farm on an island, please do. It will heal a part of you, I promise. But now I'm going through and kind of creating some flower beds. Once again, this was a spot that was originally going to house crops, but once I had the crops here, I was like, this ain't it. This is not it. So I decided to instead make these little flower beds, which I think is really cute. I feel like I haven't gone through and made very like structured flower spots on the island. I feel like Fauna's house is the only place where we had just big rows of flowers going, and it was still a tiny micro build at her house. But I went through and decided to just use some excess flowers that I had, and I also used some hyacinth lamps because I did that over at Fauna's house as well, and I loved how that looked. But of course, I'm just going through adding a couple of finishing touches before we move on to the final area of this speed build. Last but certainly not least, the pumpkin patch for Oak Hollow. I am seriously so excited for you guys to see how this area ends up looking. It was one of those spots that I kind of struggled with at first. I didn't really know if I liked how it looked, but once those finishing touches got put on at the end, it was divine. I love how everything turns out. It is so cool. I decided to try and find a way to kind of mix that structured, very like commercial farm vibe along with, once again, adding some personality, some flair, and of course my personal design style, which is just clutter core. I feel like every single tile needs to be filled. I think that's also a good piece of design advice. Maybe we add this to our top 10 list, but cover every single tile. It's going to make your Switch be very angry with you. Your Switch will get warm. It will start humming, but that's okay, because I am constantly trying to push Nintendo to the limit. The fact that they've made us wait this long for another Animal Crossing game is absolutely diabolical. It should be criminal. They should be charged, because that's crazy. So I'm going to push my Switch to the limits to try and see how much stuff I can fit onto an island, and I'm starting to deal with the repercussions from that, because as I mentioned, the lag in this area is absolutely insane, which is partially due to the 15 million wheat fields that I put in the wheat field area. I feel like that was really rough. I also found out recently that if your DA, or the time that you're playing in, is set to a windy day, usually during autumn or in springtime, it makes lag worse because the game is like also struggling to have the leaf particles flowing through the air, which like I don't know how factual that is, but hey, it makes a lot of sense because the Switch is a tiny little console. It probably can't handle much. I remember trying to play Skyrim once on my Switch years ago when the Switch was first released. That did not go very well. I've played some interesting games on my Switch. This is just the most random side tangent, but I remember playing LA Noire actually, which is a really great game. I love that game so much, and I played that on my Switch of all consoles. I had seen my favorite gaming YouTubers play it back when it came out years and years and years ago. Who I can't even remember when that game came out, but Yeah, I remember playing it on my Switch, and yeah, that was like an interesting game to play on the Switch because usually you think of like Mario Party and Super Smash Bros. And stuff like that, but I'm over here playing LA Noire. Anyway, so with the actual pumpkin patch in the area that we're working on, as you saw, I went through and decided to kind of create these plots of soil that would house the actual pumpkins instead of just a giant dirt patch, because I feel like on an actual farm there's going to be rows so that you can easily walk through them, but I'm just going based off of pictures that I've seen of actual pumpkin patches because I have never been to a pumpkin farm before. I've only ever been to like a pumpkin lot, usually like in a parking lot somewhere. So I'm just going based off of vibes alone. But as you can see here, I'm building a little bit of a structure once again in front of a random terraformed block, and that is because this is going to be kind of like the area to go purchase your pumpkins. I feel like most of the lots that I've been to that sell pumpkins, usually there's just like a person walking around that you just give cash to and then you can just like take the pumpkin, but usually there will always be a little weighing station because every time I've gone to buy pumpkins, it's all based off of weight. So I like to try and build these little structures where you can like actually go to buy your pumpkins, and I'm just going through and filling it out with just some cute little autumnal items. Of course, we have a register, we have a little scale, lots of pumpkins, and I really like how the area next to it turned out. I liked stacking the boxes behind that spooky tower, but I'm also going through and trying to fill in the space a little bit with some extra clutter as well as a little picnic blanket, because I feel like in an area like this there's going to be lots of areas for downtime. Maybe it's an area where you can go through and stack some pumpkins, or maybe it's a spot where you can get some supplies for carving pumpkins, but I just overall really love the vibe. And of course, this pumpkin patch would not be complete without some filler and clutter, which we are starting to work on now. So I am starting with the top right corner of the patch where I'm trying to fill in all of this empty space at the entrance area. Technically there are two entrances because I decided to give two separate openings to the pumpkin patch, so that way there are easy paths to kind of move through this build. I've found that whenever I work on more like cottagey natural builds, I do not make them easy to walk through, so I'm really trying to make sure that you can move around this entire build freely, but I am just trying to give this whole area a homey small town feel. Of course, this is Oak Hollow after all, so I'm working with all of these little items that I'm kind of just tucking around the empty spaces. As you can tell, I'm gravitating towards more of the garden and farm-like items, so things like stacked bags, wooden boxes, planters, of course a plain lights party arch or plain party lights arch. I always get the name wrong for that item, so I do apologize if that's a pet peeve for you. But yeah, I'm just trying to fill in this space with a ton of extra character. I have been using some hay beds, which was really fun because I feel like I never get to use that item. I don't know what it is about autumn, but I just feel like hay is ubiquitous with autumn decorations. Like you just go to a pumpkin patch and there's just hay bales for no reason. It's like we are in the middle of a city. Why are we having hay at our pumpkin patch? Like I live in a pretty urban area, but even the pumpkin lots that I go to have hay, and I'm like, where did you get this from? Where did this come from? But as you can see here, I'm going through and filling in the actual like pumpkin patch dirt lot spots with some pumpkin items. So I'm just using a collection of spooky items. I'm using some spooky scarecrows, some spooky lanterns, of course, as well as some spooky chairs, which I feel like I never use these spooky chairs. I don't know why. They're my new favorite pumpkin item because I feel like you can layer in so many interesting items with them by using the tops of the chairs, and so going through and being able to kind of layer up different items gives more visual interest. And the whole reason that I'm layering these types of items alongside the actual pumpkin plants is because the pumpkin plants are quite small, so I like to think that maybe the pumpkin plants are the early stages of a pumpkin growing, while the actual like spooky lanterns are full-grown pumpkins, because I feel like they're more accurate to real sizing. But at the same time, I really like the look of kind of like staggering the different size variations. I feel like that's another good design tip, is placing too many items that are the same height or the same size can really lead to a space looking very monotonous. So going through and kind of having some height variations and working within the rules of three is a really great way to have a cohesive look in a build. Now, I definitely went through and glossed over this little pumpkin carving station that I set off to the river's edge, and while it's probably not the safest place to hunker down and carve a pumpkin, considering that one chair is like right next to the water, but safety concerns aside, I really like how that spot turned out. I feel like it's really cute. Even though I've never actually carved a pumpkin at a pumpkin patch, I love to add little carving stations to areas like this. And I put some pretty fun items on top. Of course, you've already seen it. I'm just going through and placing down some items in these little pumpkin beds. But I used not only the cutting boards and the recycled newspaper bundles, because I feel like if you're gonna carve pumpkins, you're usually gonna set something down underneath the pumpkin that you're carving. So that's why I added the newspaper. But I also added the pumpkin soup item because it looks like someone has just started carving a pumpkin, which I think is really cool. So it almost looked like someone had gone through and like made a lid and like carved it, and then there's just like pumpkin guts floating around. But pumpkin carving station aside, we are working on the final finishing touches of this area. So I really wanted to try and make more builds in this spot interactable, and as you can see, I left an open space on the actual shed area, and my original idea was to go through and make this another little like diner spot, or maybe another spot to carve some pumpkins or something, but it just really did not come together the way that I wanted it to. You will see it come together in just a moment. I'm going to be turning it into kind of like a little lookout for the apple orchard, but I was once again starting to hit my limit with lag and was just really struggling with being able to place items down without just completely destroying my game. And as I mentioned earlier at the start of this video, I went through enough software issues and tech difficulties with this video, so my capture card, which is the piece of tech that I use to do these videos, actually broke, so I had to get a new one, which is why this video has been so delayed. And then on top of that, the lag just really pushing me to the edge here. But as you can see, we're going through and starting the bones of the actual lookout area. I have a feeling this will probably change and develop as I go through and put the finishing touches on the island, but this is actually the final area. So without further ado, let's take a look at the beauty shots. Alrighty besties, that is everything for today's speed build. I seriously cannot wait to hear which area was your favorite that we worked on, and I hope that you're excited for our final Oak Hollow build, which will be coming very soon. It feels so bittersweet, but I am so ready. Feel free to try and guess down below what our next and final build will be, and if you guess correctly, I will pin your comment. But also do let me know if you're still working on your own autumn islands, or if you are moving on to the winter time. I know winter is not the most popular season in game, but I am curious. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I can't wait to close this chapter on Oak Hollow and move into another island theme with you guys, which I think you're really going to like. So definitely stick around and subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell so you can get notified of when we finish Oak Hollow and start our super secret winter island. But have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon. Bye friends!